Daniel Hayes woke up to the sound of bells. Not Earth bells, not the kind he remembered from his childhood in Ohio. These were Valorian bells, deep and strange, echoing through the metal walls of the Imperial flagship. They rang every morning to mark the start of the Emperor's Day. 15 years. He had been counting every single one of them. He sat up slowly, his bones aching from another restless night. The bed was comfortable now, soft and warm, nothing like the cold metal floor of his first cell. But comfort did not mean home. It never would. Daniel walked to the small window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, millions of light years away, was Earth. He had been an astrophysicist once, a man who studied those stars from the safety of a university office. He had a wife named Catherine and a daughter named Emma. Emma would be 23 now. She had been 8 years old when the Valorians came. He tried not to think about them too often. It hurt too much. The door behind him opened with a soft hiss. He did not turn around. He already knew who it was. "Good morning, Daniel," said Lithara. She was young by Valorian standards, only about 40 years old, which made her roughly equivalent to a human in her late 20s. Her scales were pale blue, almost silver in certain lights, and her 4 eyes were the color of honey. She had been assigned as his translator 8 years ago, back when he still needed one. "Morning," he said quietly. "The Emperor wishes to see you. There is a problem with the Northern Territories." There was always a problem. That was why they kept him around. Daniel turned away from the window and began to dress. His clothes were simple, plain gray fabric that looked nothing like the colorful robes worn by Valorian nobles. He had refused their clothing from the very beginning. It was one of the few rebellions he had left. "What kind of problem?" he asked. "Rebels. They attacked a supply convoy yesterday. 12 ships destroyed, over 300 dead." Daniel paused, his hand still on his shirt. 300 lives. To the Valorians, that was a small number. Their empire spanned 47 star systems and contained billions of citizens. But Daniel had learned long ago that every death mattered, no matter how small the number seemed. "I will be there soon," he said. Lithara nodded and left him alone. Daniel finished dressing and looked at himself in the mirror. He was 52 years old now, his hair more gray than brown, his face lined with years of stress and sleepless nights. He barely recognized the man staring back at him. The young scientist who had dreamed of exploring the universe was gone. In his place stood something harder, something colder. Something useful. That was the word the Valorians used. Useful. Daniel Hayes was useful. He walked through the corridors of the flagship, passing guards and servants who bowed their heads as he went by. That still felt strange to him, even after all these years. He was a prisoner, a captive from a conquered world. Yet they treated him with respect, sometimes even fear. It had not always been this way. When the Valorians first captured him, they threw him in a cell with 20 other humans. They were specimens, nothing more. The aliens studied them like insects, poking and prodding, trying to understand these strange creatures from a primitive planet. Most of the other prisoners died within the first year. Disease, despair, violence. Daniel survived because he was stubborn. He refused to give up, refused to let them break him. He learned their language by listening through the walls. He studied their behavior, their customs, their weaknesses, and then came the day that changed everything. The Emperor's convoy was traveling through hostile space when a rival faction attacked. The Valorian generals panicked, their strategies failing one after another. The enemy ships were faster, smarter, better prepared. Daniel had been watching from his cell, listening to the chaos through the communication systems he had secretly tapped into. He saw what the generals could not see. The enemy was using a simple trap, drawing the Valorian forces into a narrow corridor where they could be surrounded. He did something crazy. He started shouting, The guards came to silence him, but he kept shouting, telling them exactly what the enemy was doing and exactly how to stop it. At first, they ignored him. Then, one of them, a young officer named Kethros, decided to listen. The strategy worked. The enemy was defeated. The Emperor survived. 3 days later, Daniel was brought before Emperor Zethkal for the first time. The Emperor was massive, over 8 feet tall, with dark green scales and 6 eyes that seemed to see everything at once. His voice was deep and powerful, shaking the walls when he spoke. "You saved my life," the Emperor said. Daniel stood there, small and weak and human, and said nothing. Why? Daniel thought about the question for a long moment. He could have lied. He could have said something noble about peace or mercy. But he was too tired for lies. "Because if you die, someone worse might take your place," he said. "At least you keep your prisoners alive." The Emperor laughed. It was a terrible sound, like rocks grinding together, but it was genuine. "You are interesting, human. I think I will keep you close." And so began Daniel's strange new life. He became the Emperor's shadow, his secret advisor, the voice that whispered strategies and solutions that no Valorian could see. He never received an official title. He never wore a uniform or accepted payment. He made it clear every single day that he was not their servant, not their ally, not their friend. He was their prisoner who happened to be useful. But as the years passed, something changed. Daniel began to understand the Valorians better than he wanted to. He learned that they were not monsters, not all of them. They had families, hopes, fears. They loved their children and mourned their dead. They were different from humans, but not as different as he had first believed. That understanding made everything harder. Now, walking toward the Emperor's chamber, Daniel felt the weight of those 15 years pressing down on him. He had saved the Empire dozens of times. He had prevented wars, stopped rebellions, negotiated treaties. He had become something important, something powerful, but he was still a prisoner. And somewhere out there beyond the stars, Earth was still waiting. He reached the great doors of the Emperor's chamber and paused. The guards bowed and stepped aside. Daniel took a deep breath, pushed away his memories and his pain, and walked inside to do what he had been doing for 15 years, surviving. The Emperor's war room was filled with angry voices. Daniel stood in the corner, watching and listening, as he always did. The Valorian generals were arguing about the rebel attack, each one blaming the others for the failure. General Vorn was the loudest. He was old and proud, with scales the color of dried blood and 3 deep scars across his face. He had been a warrior for over 200 years, and he hated Daniel with every part of his being. "This would not have happened if we followed traditional tactics," Vorn growled, slamming his fist on the table. "Instead, we listen to the human. We follow his strange ideas. And look what happens." Several other generals nodded in agreement. They were members of House Morinth, the oldest and most traditional of the 3 great houses that served the Emperor. They believed in strength and honor and doing things the way they had always been done. On the other side of the table sat the representatives of House Silvari. They were the ones who had first attacked Earth 15 years ago, hungry for resources and conquest. Their leader, Admiral Theska, was thin and sharp, with bright yellow eyes that never stopped moving. "The rebel attack has nothing to do with the human," Theska said coldly. "It is the result of weakness in our outer defenses. We should have expanded further, taken more territory, shown our enemies that we are not afraid." The third group, House Kendrith, remained mostly silent. They were merchants and diplomats, more interested in trade than war. Their leader, Lady Thesha, sat quietly, her silver scales gleaming in the light. Her eyes, however, kept drifting to Daniel. Emperor Zethkal raised one massive hand, and the room went silent. "Enough," the Emperor said. Daniel, what do you think? Every eye in the room turned to the human in the corner. Daniel felt their stares, some curious, some hateful, some afraid. He stepped forward slowly. The rebels are not your biggest problem, he said. VORN made a sound of disgust. Of course, the human tries to change the subject. Let him speak, the Emperor commanded. Daniel walked to the large map displayed on the central table. It showed the entire Valorian Empire, all 47 star systems, glowing like jewels against the darkness of space. He pointed to a small cluster of stars on the far edge. This is where the rebels attacked, he said. But look at the pattern of their movements over the past 6 months. They are not trying to win. They are trying to distract. Distract from what? Admiral Theska demanded. Daniel moved his hand across the map to another region, one that bordered empty space. From this, the human territories. The room went very quiet. What about them? The Emperor asked slowly. Daniel looked directly at Zethkal. How long has it been since you sent scouts to Earth? The Emperor did not answer, but Lady Thesha spoke up. 3 years. Our last report said the humans were still recovering from our initial raids. They pose no threat. 3 years is a long time, Daniel said. Things can change. He saw the flicker of something in the Emperor's eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps. Or fear. What do you know, human? Vorn demanded, stepping closer with his hand on his weapon. What are you hiding? I know nothing, Daniel said calmly. I am only asking questions. But if I were you, I would send scouts again. Soon. The meeting ended shortly after that. The generals left arguing among themselves, their alliances shifting and reforming like clouds in a storm. Daniel stayed behind, as he often did, waiting for the room to empty. But this time, Lady Thesha stayed as well. She waited until they were alone, then approached him with careful, measured steps. She was smaller than most Valorians, barely 7 feet tall, and her movements were graceful and precise. You already know, do you not? She said quietly. Daniel did not answer. My house has eyes everywhere, Thesha continued. Even in places the Emperor does not watch. We intercepted transmissions from your world 3 months ago. Daniel felt his heart beating faster, but he kept his face calm. What kind of transmissions? Thesha reached into her robe and pulled out a small device. She activated it, and a hologram appeared in the air between them. It showed a planet, blue and green and beautiful. Earth. But it was different from the Earth Daniel remembered. Around the planet floated dozens of massive structures, shipyards, and defense platforms, all bristling with weapons. And in orbit, arranged in perfect formation, was a fleet of warships. Human warships. They have been busy, Thesha said. Our analysts believe they reverse-engineered our technology from the ships we lost during the initial invasion. They are building faster than we thought possible. Daniel stared at the hologram, unable to speak. His hands were trembling. In 5 years, perhaps less, they will be strong enough to attack, Thesha continued. They are coming, Daniel. Your people are coming for revenge. He finally found his voice. Why are you showing me this? Because I want peace. Thesha turned off the device and put it back in her robe. War with humanity will destroy us. Not immediately, perhaps not even in my lifetime. But your species is dangerous. You adapt, you learn, you never give up. If we fight you again, we will eventually lose. Then tell the Emperor. I will. But I wanted you to know first. She studied him with her silver eyes. You have a choice to make, Daniel Hayes. You can tell the Emperor what you know and help us prepare for war. Or you can say nothing and let your people have their revenge. She turned and walked toward the door, then paused. I hope you choose peace. For both our sakes. After she left, Daniel stood alone in the empty war room, staring at the map of the Empire. 47 star systems. Billions of lives. All of them depending on decisions made by generals and emperors, and one human prisoner who had never asked for any of this. He thought about Catherine and Emma. Were they still alive? Did they know he had survived? Were they on one of those ships, waiting to come find him? Or were they dead, killed in the initial invasion? Just two more names in a list of billions. He did not know. He had never been able to find out. Daniel closed his eyes and made his decision. He would tell the Emperor the truth. Not because he loved the Valorians, not because he wanted to protect them, but because he knew what war would bring. Death and destruction on both sides. Millions of humans and Valorians killed in a conflict that did not need to happen. He had spent 15 years trying to survive. Now it was time to try something harder. It was time to build peace. But first, he would have to survive the enemies inside the Empire who wanted him dead. And that, he knew, would be the hardest battle of all. The Festival of Three Moons was the biggest celebration in the Valorian Empire. For 1 week, the entire capital came alive with music, lights, and feasting. Citizens from all 47 systems traveled to attend. Even the poorest workers received gifts and food from their masters. Daniel hated it. The crowds made him nervous. Too many people, too many faces, too many chances for something to go wrong. He had asked the Emperor for permission to stay in his quarters during the festival, but Zethkal had refused. "You are my advisor," the Emperor had said. "You must be seen at my side. It shows strength." So Daniel stood in the great hall of the Imperial Palace, surrounded by thousands of Valorians celebrating and drinking and laughing. He wore his usual gray clothes, refusing the colorful robes that had been offered to him. He held a glass of something that tasted like bitter honey, but did not drink it. Lithara stood beside him, her blue scales shimmering in the light of 1,000 floating lanterns. "You look uncomfortable," she said. "I am uncomfortable. Try to smile. People are watching." Daniel attempted something that might have been a smile. Lithara made a clicking sound that meant she was laughing at him. "That is terrible. Please stop." Despite everything, Daniel felt a small spark of warmth. Lithara was the closest thing he had to a friend in this place. She had been with him for 8 years, translating at first, then simply keeping him company as his Valorian improved. She was kind in a way that most Valorians were not, curious about humans and genuinely interested in understanding them. He trusted her. He did not trust many people anymore. The evening continued. The Emperor gave a speech about the glory of the Empire. The generals toasted to victories past and future. The merchants made deals in shadowy corners. And through it all, Daniel watched and listened, as he always did. He noticed General Vorn leaving the main hall around midnight. That was unusual. Vorn loved attention, loved being seen at important events. Why would he leave early? Daniel made a mental note, but said nothing. An hour later, he decided he had suffered enough. He told Lithara he was going back to his quarters and slipped away from the celebration. The corridors were quiet, most of the guards having been assigned to the main hall. His footsteps echoed on the metal floor. He was halfway to his room when he felt it. A prickling sensation on the back of his neck. The feeling of being watched. Daniel stopped walking. The corridor was empty, silent. The lights flickered slightly, casting strange shadows on the walls. He had learned to trust his instincts over the years. They had kept him alive through 15 years of captivity, through plots and schemes and dangers he could not even remember anymore. And right now, his instincts were screaming at him to run. He did not run. Instead, he turned around slowly. 3 figures stepped out of the shadows. They were Valorians, dressed in black, their faces covered. Each one carried a curved blade that gleamed in the dim light. Assassins. "Daniel Hayes," one of them said. "Your time in this empire is over." Daniel's mind raced. He was not a fighter. He had never been a fighter. He was a scientist, an advisor, a man who used words instead of weapons. Against 3 trained killers, he had no chance, but he was not going to die standing still. He moved just as the first assassin attacked, throwing himself to the side and crashing into a small table by the wall. The blade missed him by inches, cutting through the air where his head had been a moment before. Daniel grabbed the first thing his hand touched, a decorative knife that had been sitting on the table. It was meant for display, not combat, but it was better than nothing. The second assassin came at him fast, too fast to dodge. Daniel raised his arm and felt the blade slice across his ribs, hot pain exploding through his body. He screamed but did not fall. Instead, he stabbed forward with his small knife, catching the assassin in the throat. Violet blood sprayed across the corridor. The assassin fell. The other 2 hesitated. They had expected an easy kill, not a fight. Daniel backed away, pressing one hand against his bleeding side. The wound was deep. He could feel his strength fading with every heartbeat. "Who sent you?" he gasped. The assassins did not answer. They came at him together. Daniel knew he could not win. He was too slow, too weak, too human. But he was not going to make it easy for them. The first blade cut across his shoulder. He ducked under the second and stabbed again, missing this time. A kick caught him in the chest and sent him crashing against the wall. He tasted blood in his mouth. One of the assassins raised his blade for the killing blow. Then a sound filled the corridor. A high-pitched scream of rage, and something blue and silver crashed into the assassin from behind. Single quotes, era. She had followed him. She must have noticed something wrong, sensed the danger, and come running. She fought like a wild animal, her claws slashing, her teeth biting, her usually gentle eyes burning with fury. The assassins were caught off guard. One of them fell to her attack, his throat torn open. The other tried to run, but Lithera was faster. She caught him before he reached the end of the corridor and killed him with a single strike. Then there was silence. Daniel slid down the wall, his vision blurring. The pain in his side was overwhelming. He could feel the warmth of his blood pooling beneath him. Lithara ran to him, her scales splattered with violet and red. "Daniel, stay awake. Stay with me. You saved me," he whispered. "Of course I did, you stupid human." Her voice was shaking. "Now stop talking and let me get help." She lifted him easily. Valorians were much stronger than humans and started running toward the medical wing. Daniel's head bounced against her shoulder with every step. Through the haze of pain, one thought kept repeating in his mind. He looked at the dead assassins as Lithara carried him away. He saw the insignia on their black clothing, the symbol of a crimson blade against a dark field. House Morinth. General Vorn's house. Vorn had finally made his move. Daniel smiled despite the pain. The general had just made a terrible mistake. Because now Daniel had proof. Now he had evidence. And the Emperor would not forgive an assassination attempt during his sacred festival. If Daniel survived the next few hours. Everything was about to change. He closed his eyes and let the darkness take him, trusting Lithara to keep him alive long enough to finish what he had started. Daniel woke up in a white room that smelled like medicine and metal. His body ached everywhere, but especially along his ribs where the assassin's blade had cut him. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. "Do not move," said a voice beside him. "Your wounds are still healing." He turned his head and saw Lithara sitting in a chair next to his bed. She looked exhausted, her scales dull and her eyes heavy. She had been there for a while, he realized. "Maybe the whole time. How long?" he asked, his voice rough. 2 days. The healers said you almost died. Humans are very fragile. Daniel wanted to laugh, but it hurt too much. "Thanks for the reminder." The door opened and Emperor Zethkal entered. The massive Valorian had to duck to fit through the doorway. His 6 eyes immediately found Daniel, and something that might have been relief crossed his ancient face. "Leave us," the Emperor commanded Lithara. She hesitated, looking at Daniel. "It is all right," Daniel said. "I will be fine." Lithara nodded slowly and left the room. The Emperor waited until the door closed behind her, then approached the bed. "You killed 2 of my assassins," Zethkal said. "Your assassins?" "Assassins from my empire. Members of my military. Sent by one of my generals." The Emperor's voice was heavy with anger and shame. "This happened under my protection during my festival. It is my failure." Daniel said nothing. He had learned long ago that sometimes silence was the best response. "General Vorn has been arrested," the Emperor continued, "along with 17 of his officers. They will face trial for treason. Will they be executed?" "That depends on the evidence." "And on you." Daniel frowned. "On me?" The Emperor moved closer, his massive form blocking out the light. "You were the target. You have the right to demand their deaths. By our law, the victim speaks at the trial. Your word could condemn them or spare them." For a moment, Daniel imagined it. Vorn kneeling before him, waiting for judgment. The general who had hated him for 15 years, who had tried to kill him, finally at his mercy. It would feel good. Daniel could not deny that. But he shook his head. "No executions. Exile them instead. Send them to the outer colonies, to the mining stations where they will have to work for their survival. Let them live with their failure." The Emperor studied him with all 6 eyes. "You are more merciful than I expected. Mercy has nothing to do with it. Dead martyrs are dangerous. Living failures are just pathetic. Vorn will suffer more from shame than he ever would from death." A slow smile spread across Zethkal's face. "You continue to surprise me, human. After 15 years, I thought I understood you. I was wrong." Daniel tried to sit up again, slower this time. The pain was still there, but he could manage it now. "I need to talk to you about something," he said. "The human fleet," the Emperor replied. "Yes, Lady Desha told me everything after the attack. She said she showed you the information 3 days ago." Daniel nodded. "I was going to tell you. I just had not found the right moment. And now? Now I need to know what you plan to do about it." The Emperor walked to the window and looked out at the stars. His reflection in the glass showed a tired creature, old beyond measure, carrying burdens that no single being should have to bear. "I do not know," Zethkal admitted. "My generals want war. They see your species as a threat that must be destroyed before it grows too strong. Admiral Theska has already drawn up invasion plans. And you? I am tired of war." The Emperor's voice was quiet, almost sad. "I have been fighting for 300 years. I have conquered worlds and crushed rebellions and watched millions die in my name. I thought it was necessary. I thought it was right. But now," he turned back to face Daniel. "Now I look at you, and I see what we have done. We took you from your home. We killed your people. We made you a prisoner for 15 years. And despite all of that, you saved my life. You helped my empire. You never became the monster we tried to make you." Daniel felt something strange stirring in his chest. He had hated the Valorians for so long, hated them with every breath in his body. But looking at the Emperor now, he saw something he had not expected. Regret. "I want to go home," Daniel said. The words came out before he could stop them. 15 years of pain and loneliness and desperate survival, all compressed into 5 simple words. The Emperor closed his eyes. "I know. You said I was not a prisoner anymore. You said I was free. Let me leave. Let me go back to Earth and see if my family is still alive. Let me die among my own people instead of alone in this place. I cannot. Why not? The Emperor opened his eyes, and Daniel saw something he had never seen there before. Fear. Because if you leave, the Empire falls. Daniel stared at him. That is ridiculous. I am one man, one human. I have no power here. You have more power than you know. The Emperor moved closer, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. You are the only being in 47 systems who tells me the truth. Everyone else lies. My children plot against each other. My generals pursue glory instead of victory. My advisors tell me only what they think I want to hear. But you have never been afraid of me. You have never tried to use me. You say what you think, even when it makes me angry. That does not make me important. It makes you essential. The Emperor sat down heavily, as if the weight of his words was too much to bear standing. When my enemies see you at my side, they hesitate. When my generals propose foolish plans, they know you will speak against them. When foreign powers come to negotiate, they respect us because we have you. You have become a symbol, Daniel Hayes, a proof that we are different from the monsters they believe us to be. Daniel felt his anger rising. I did not ask for any of this. I did not ask to be your symbol or your advisor or your proof of anything. I just wanted to survive long enough to go home. I know, and I'm sorry. The Emperor looked genuinely sad. I have taken so much from you. Your freedom, your family, your life. And now I am asking you to give up your last hope as well. It is not fair. It is not right. But it is true. The room fell silent. Daniel looked at the Emperor, this ancient creature who ruled billions of lives, and saw only a tired old man begging for help. What would you give me? Daniel said slowly. If I stayed? The Emperor met his eyes. Anything, everything. Name your price, and it is yours. Daniel thought about Catherine and Emma. He thought about Earth and the fleet that was coming. He thought about war and peace and all the lives that hung in the balance. Then he started talking. The negotiations lasted 3 days. Daniel refused to speak with anyone except the Emperor directly. He refused to meet in the war room or the throne room or any of the grand halls where Valorian nobles gathered to watch and whisper. Instead, they met in Daniel's small quarters, where the Emperor had to crouch to fit through the door and squeeze his massive body into a chair meant for humans. It was uncomfortable and awkward and slightly ridiculous. That was exactly why Daniel chose it. First demand, Daniel said on the first day. Complete transparency about Earth. Every scout report, every intercepted transmission, every piece of intelligence your empire has gathered about my people. No more secrets. No more lies. The Emperor nodded slowly. Agreed. Second demand. There are still human prisoners in your empire. 217 by my count. Some in labor camps. Some in research facilities. Some kept as servants by noble families. I want them freed. All of them. Immediately. This was harder. The Emperor's eyes flickered with something that might have been resistance. Some of those prisoners belong to powerful houses. They will resist. I do not care. Free them, or I walk away right now. There was a long pause. Then the Emperor nodded again. Agreed. On the second day, Daniel made his most dangerous demand. I want peace with Earth. A formal treaty. The Valorian Empire will return everything it took during the initial raids. Resources, technology, artifacts. And it will pay reparations for the lives lost. The Emperor's scales darkened, a sign of strong emotion. Reparations? You want us to pay for our victory? I want you to pay for your crimes. You invaded a planet that had done nothing to threaten you. You killed millions of innocent people. You took prisoners and slaves and treated them like animals. That was not victory. That was massacre. we will look weak. Our enemies will see this as surrender. Your enemies will see this as wisdom. A strong empire does not need to crush every world it encounters. A strong empire can afford to show mercy. The emperor was silent for a long time. Daniel watched him struggle, watched the pride and anger battle against something deeper. Finally, Zethkal spoke. You truly believe this peace is possible? After everything we have done to your people? I do not know, Daniel admitted. Humans are not quick to forgive. There will be many on Earth who want revenge, who will see any treaty as a betrayal of the dead. But there will also be those who are tired of war, who want to build instead of destroy. I cannot promise peace will last. I can only promise to try. And if you fail? If your people reject the treaty and come for blood anyway? Daniel met the emperor's eyes. Then I will have done everything I could. And so will you. That has to be enough. The third day was for final details. Daniel demanded that Lith-Ar be named Imperial Ambassador to humanity. She had saved his life. She understood both species better than anyone. And she was the only Valorian he actually trusted. She is very young, the emperor said doubtfully. She is brave, smart, and honest. You do not need experience to have those qualities. You just need character. He demanded that General Vorn and his conspirators face public trial, not secret execution. Let the Empire see that treason had consequences. Let them see that the Emperor was just but not cruel. Exile them to the outer mining colonies, Daniel said. Make them work alongside the workers they used to command. Let them learn what it means to be powerless. Finally, Daniel demanded something for himself. I want to send a message to Earth, a real message, not filtered through your diplomats or edited by your censors. I want to tell them who I am and what I have been doing for 15 years. I want to tell them that peace is possible. The Emperor agreed to everything. 1 month later, Daniel stood on the observation deck of the Imperial flagship, watching a small courier ship depart for human space. Inside that ship was his message. The first official communication between Earth and the Valorian Empire in 15 years. In his message, Daniel had told them everything. The invasion, his capture, his years as a prisoner and advisor. He had told them about the Emperor and the great houses and the politics of an empire they had never imagined. And he had asked them, begged them, to give peace a chance. He did not know if they would listen. Lith-Ar joined him on the observation deck. She was wearing new robes now, the silver and blue of an imperial ambassador. She looked nervous and proud and slightly terrified, which Daniel thought was exactly the right attitude for someone about to help bridge two civilizations. You could have gone with them, she said quietly. The Emperor would not have stopped you. Not after everything. I know. So why did you stay? Daniel watched the courier ship grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared among the stars. Because the work is not finished. Peace is not something you achieve once and then forget about. It requires constant effort, constant attention, constant sacrifice. If I leave now, everything I have built could fall apart. Vorn is gone, but there are others who think like him. Deska still wants expansion. The great houses still plot against each other. Someone needs to stay and make sure this treaty survives. And that someone has to be you? No, it does not have to be me. But it should be me. I understand both sides. I know what humans fear and what Valorians need. I can translate between them, not just the words, but the meanings behind the words. If anyone can make this piece work, it is me. Lith-Ar made her clicking laugh. That is very arrogant. Yes, it is also true. They stood together in silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth waiting. Catherine and Emma, if they were still alive. The human fleet, still growing. An entire species, deciding whether to accept peace or demand war. Daniel did not know what they would choose. He did not know if he would ever see his home again. He did not know if his sacrifice would be worth it in the end. But for the first time in 15 years, he felt something other than survival. He felt hope. "You know," Lithar said, "when I was first assigned to you, I thought you were strange and ugly and boring." Daniel looked at her. "Thank you for that. But now I think you might be the most interesting creature I have ever met. A human who changed an empire. A prisoner who became essential. A man who chose peace when he had every reason to choose revenge." "I am just stubborn," Daniel said. "Humans are good at that." Lithar smiled, a gesture she had learned from watching him over the years. "Yes," she said, "I have noticed." Behind them, the stars stretched on forever, vast and ancient and indifferent to the small dramas of mortal creatures. But somewhere in that darkness, two species were taking their first uncertain steps toward understanding that it would not be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But Daniel Hayes, the reluctant advisor, the prisoner who saved an empire, the human who refused to break, was ready to try. And that, he thought, was what it meant to be human. Not strength or power or the ability to conquer, just a stubborn, foolish, beautiful determination to keep trying. No matter how hard things became, the empire would not fall today. And maybe, if they were very lucky and very careful, it would never have to fall at all. Daniel turned away from the stars and walked back into the ship. There was work to do.